Hello and welcome to DFS Coach Talk. It's Saturday, December 11th, 2021. I'm Andrew Hanson alongside Josh Crash Davis. This is our Week 14 NFL Primetime show, going over the Sunday night and Monday night games. Two rematches here. We've got Chicago, Green Bay, Rams, and Cardinals. And we're going to try to build some winners and celebrate some winners. Before we break it down, speaking of celebration, got to mention another birthday in the family, Josh, my niece, Lucy, her birthday today. So happy birthday to her. And let's be in this celebratory mood here all weekend with some real success. Now, the first game we're going to break down, Chicago, Green Bay. We know that you are basically a Green Bay Packers insider. Green Bay did win the first matchup here, 24-14. Are you ready to celebrate another win here before the game even starts?
No, I never want to celebrate before a game starts.
Okay.
You gotta always take your opponent seriously. You know, we've seen it in the past where you think a team's going to win for sure, and there's no chance that their opponent's going to win, and then it ends up to bite you in the backside. So never want to celebrate too early.
All right, good. I like it. Well, then let's pay attention to the Chicago breakdown. Maybe we'll have a couple players to play. As I've got the road team here to start. Big news, Justin Fields back out there. And he did play in that earlier matchup, and he was solid. He passed for 174 and a score, did have a pick. He ran it 6 times for 43. And again, that was week 6. And following that game, he really started to improve. His numbers kept increasing, but then he got hurt, and he hasn't played since week 11. So, you know, this is big for the Bears to see if he can finish the season strong. I do think he's playable. It's an average matchup for quarterbacks. And again, I think, you know, with the experience since that game, he should be able to match that performance. And he does have an extra weapon back. Yeah. That's going to be Allen Robinson. He's been dealing with the hamstring issue. He's back in to go along with Mooney. Doubtful side here, Goodwin. We are recording this Saturday late afternoon, so we'll check on the injury reports tomorrow. But do we want to pair Fields up with anyone in particular? Mooney has been the guy here of late. He was solid in that game against Green Bay. He did catch that 1 touchdown pass. Robinson had a decent game, but we know he's had a really, a poor season. And with the hamstring issue, probably won't go there. Certainly not in cash. I would lean to Mooney. He is more expensive. If you want to look at a GPP target, Jakeem Grant is the guy that I'm thinking about. You know, he really stepped up last week with Robinson out again, 5 for 62 and a score. He's got some speed, only 2,800 on Draftkings. So he's got the potential to be that last guy in for me. Cole Kmet is worth a look on a showdown slate. Seems to be kind of a steady, sort of middle tight end type guy. You know, he's not going to get you 8 or 9 targets a week, usually more than just a couple, though. He had 4 catches in this matchup earlier, decent price. It's a middle-of-the-road matchup. But, you know, the reason I'm talking primarily about the quarterback in the passing game here is because right now I'm more interested there than I am in the running game. Did you know, Josh, that your Green Bay Packers have not allowed a 100-yard rusher this season?
I did. I did.
So, I don't know if that changes this week. I mean, Herbert did great against them. 97 yards, 5.1 per carry. He got in the end zone. But it's Montgomery now. He's expensive on DraftKings. He's $10,000. So I think I'm more likely to go with Fields than one of the pass catchers here. What are your thoughts on the Bears side up against your tough Green Bay defense?
Well, it's interesting because for me, the first player I thought of in this game from the Bears, as far as who I would be concerned about, was Montgomery. And the reason why is the short passing game. And although we haven't allowed a 100-yard rusher all year, we have allowed several rushing touchdowns and receiving touchdowns to running backs. Henderson caught a pass out of the backfield for a touchdown against us in the last game. And, I think Herbert scored a touchdown when we played the Bears in the first matchup this year. So those touchdowns, I think, are definitely what I would be looking at with Montgomery. I think he will probably find the end zone, even if he doesn't have, 100 yards rushing or whatever. But that's my concern as a Packers fan.
Yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, I think you'd probably have to say he's the most talented skills position player they have in terms of
Mhm.
health, and he'll get the most touches. So I hear you there. I think the way I was breaking it down is really deciding between Field and Montgomery.
Yeah.
And with Fields rushing upside, I think that's why I'm leaning that way, because obviously he'll be passing it a bunch as well. But if I do go that route, then Montgomery will be scary for me as well if I fade him. So we'll
Yeah.
see how it plays out.
Yeah, and in all fairness, if it was Andy Dalton, which is what I thought it was going to be, it would have been a lot easier decision, I think, because
Yep.
that would have definitely tipped the scales towards Montgomery.
Agreed.
So for Green Bay, obviously it all starts with Aaron Rodgers. He's 18,000 in the captain spot, 12,000 in the flex, so very expensive, obviously, but he's been playing at the highest level that he has all season in the last 2 weeks against Minnesota and the Rams. And he's had about 25 DraftKings points per game against the Bears since he became, since Matt LaFleur became the head coach, and he's been in that LaFleur system. So I definitely like Aaron Rodgers, obviously. Devontae Adams, another obvious play, but he's had mediocre numbers against them in Chicago and pretty strong, about 18 DraftKings points a game against them at home. So I definitely like Adams here. Pro Football Focus gives him the second best matchup advantage on the slate with a 96.5 matchup against all Chicago defenders. And they project him to be the third highest scoring wide receiver behind only Justin Jefferson and Cooper Kupp.
Yeah. So when you say slate there, you're talking about the whole weekend.
Yeah, the weekend.
Yep.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. This week, week 14.
Yep.
And then MVS is 7,200 in the flex. He's 10,800 in the captain spot, but he's seen 19 targets in the last 2 games combined against Minnesota and the Rams. And with Cobb out now, probably for a little while, he's going to be out. So MVS is definitely going to be a top target for Aaron, and especially if Chicago sometimes will run that cover 2 and kind of double up on Devontae. So if they do that, that should definitely open up some opportunities for MVS. I actually don't really like the running game here for the Packers, mostly because of the split. I think it's pretty hard to predict if it's going to be a Jones week or a Dillon week. So I'd rather pay up for Rodgers and Devontae and maybe MVS. And I like the Packers defense here too. They're 5,400 in the flex. They're the 5th ranked defense in the NFL right now. The Bears offense is ranked 30th. I was a little bit higher on the Packers defense before it was announced that Justin Fields would start, instead of Andy Dalton, but they did a pretty good job against the Bears the first matchup. They held them to 14 points. They sacked Fields 4 times and intercepted him once. So I do like the Packers defense here too.
I don't know if the dog there was talking more about the defense or the running back situation.
Yeah.
I actually had a signal like that about the running game situation. I actually met somebody yesterday named Aaron Jones. Can you believe that?
Really?
Yeah. Which kind of makes me want to play him, but
yeah,
is he healthy? Because he's ultra expensive. Like you said, it could be a split situation. I'm pretty hesitant there.
Yeah, and that's exactly, what I was thinking too. I mean, they're coming off the bye week, so maybe he's a little bit better condition now and ready to play, but he sure, in my opinion, he should have just sat against the Rams because he did not look like Aaron Jones that we're used to seeing at all.
Yep. Agreed. And then the one thing I will say is, Dillon is 4,400 on DraftKings, which I think is a real nice price.
Yeah.
I think he's probably going to make my lineup because we need 6 guys, and he'll balance it out. And I feel good that he'll get close to a split.
Yeah.
And, he's been running hard and pretty well. So
I didn't realize he was that cheap. So that changes things for me too.
Mm-hmm. Now, is it possible to fade Devontae here? If the Bears can contain him a little bit with his expensive price tag?
I probably won't in cash for sure, but yeah, in a GPP you could do it. I mean, it's definitely feasible that, like I said, they would double up on Devontae, and then a guy like MVS or Alan Lazard or somebody like that gets those targets.
Excellent. All right, here. Anything else on game 1?
Go Pack, go. That's it.
All right. Well, if you want to join us for these lineups, dfscoachtalk.com. We'll have full lineups here for this showdown game on FanDuel and Yahoo, a cash lineup and a GPP lineup, and then our core on DraftKings for the cash build and the GPP build. And we're going to do the same thing for game 2 on Monday night. So jump in with us this weekend, dfscoachtalk.com to grab those lineups. All right, game 2 on Monday night, the Rams and Cardinals, also a rematch. They played in week 4. Arizona won that one 37-20. Now we go to Arizona for this one. What are your thoughts on the Rams side here? And this one, by the way, a total of 51.5. Cardinals favored by 2.5.
Well, the biggest piece of news here that we're going to have to find out is whether or not Darrell Henderson Jr. is going to play. If he plays, it could change some things for me a little bit. But assuming that he doesn't play, obviously the Rams offense pretty much starts with Cooper Kupp. Arizona was able to keep him pretty well in check in the first matchup, but he was still targeted 13 times in that game. So I think if he sees that many targets with Robert Woods out for the rest of the year, I think he's going to have some production. Arizona's been pretty tough. They've allowed the 12th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. But, Kupp is obviously one of the best in the league and pretty matchup proof. So, Pro Football Focus has him projected as the second highest scoring wide receiver this week and give him the 4th best matchup advantage against all defenders with a 92.1 matchup advantage. So I do like Kupp here. I think he has a strong bounce back from what he did in the first game. Van Jefferson, another option. He actually had the best game for all the Rams wide receivers in that first matchup. He had 6 catches for 90 yards and a touchdown. Should be pretty, quite a bit cheaper than Kupp. So as a GPP option for sure, you can look at him if you think that the Cardinals will, be able to contain Kupp once again. And then Odell Beckham Jr., he actually faced the Cardinals earlier this year with Cleveland, and he had 5 catches for 79 yards on 8 targets, probably be the cheapest of the 3. And he's seen 15 targets in the last 2 games, and he's going to be getting more familiar with that offense. So I think that you'll probably start to see him implemented more and more as the rest of the year goes on. And then Sony Michel, if Henderson's out, he carried the ball 24 times last week against Jacksonville. Should see a pretty nice workload again this week, if Henderson's out. Henderson had some success against them. He averaged 6.4 yards per carry for 89 yards rushing, and was also targeted in the passing game 6 times. So I think if Henderson's out, that Michel will be able to put up some similar numbers against the Cardinals that we saw with Henderson in the first matchup. And then as far as the tight end goes, I don't really like Tyler Higbee here. Arizona's allowed the 4th fewest fantasy points to tight ends, and I'm not wanting to go there.
Yeah, I don't really want to either. And I do think that injury news is huge for the running backs, because we saw Michel really get in the groove, and the Rams have talked about going right back to that heavy front that they use, where they put in an extra blocker for a lot of those downs against Jacksonville. And so if they're going to really highlight the run in that way again, we need to decide if we want to invest in Michel, or if they're both back, how we're going to deal with that situation. So we'll figure that out on Monday. We also don't have the pricing yet here. We try to get this early to you on the weekend to make sure you're ready for the first game, and then you can tune back into this one on Monday. But with the passing game here, I agree. They limited Kupp enough. Can they do it again? It's weird to think about this showdown slate here, primetime show, talking about possibly fading Devontae Adams and Kupp. But I'm thinking about it. Don't feel great about it, but with the pricing here and what I want to do on the other side, I could see myself going to Stafford and one of those cheaper pass catchers you talked about, Van Jefferson, OBJ. I just think it might be a little stronger with how we can bulk up on the Cardinals side and not have to go too cheap with our last guys into the lineup.
Right.
So I'm looking at Stafford, OBJ, Van Jefferson, and probably fading Higbee as well. All right, let's talk about the Arizona side here, coming off that win over Chicago. And Kyler Murray here is where we need to start, I think, with the analysis. He did pretty well against LA in that first matchup, passed for 268 and 2, ran it for 39 yards, and we saw his talent on display against Chicago. He only threw it 15 times, but he did have 2 touchdowns, and then he ran it for 59 yards and 2 scores. So very encouraging for a guy who's been dealing with injury. Not a great matchup, but he's their offense. So I think I'm going to try to get him out there and just try to figure out how we can piece together the rest of the lineup. Do we go with one of his pass catchers here? We're back to that problem with Arizona that we talked about earlier in the season, where all these receivers are healthy. So it's great for Kyler to have all these options, but it's tough to pick between Hopkins, Green, Kirk, and then you still got Moore. And if it's anything like last week, I don't think it will be, but only 15 pass attempts. Nobody was strong with the receiving core. They just didn't have the volume, and it's a tough matchup. We know the Rams are really tough, to pass catchers here. So I'm likely to go with probably Murray and one of the mid-tier guys again, sort of like the Ram side. Maybe AJ Green, who was solid against them, 5 for 67 and a score. Possibly Kirk, or maybe Zach Ertz. When they played that first time, it was Max Williams active as the tight end, 5 catches for 66 and a score. So I think that's one place you could look. Ertz was a limited participant here at the end of the week in practice because of a shoulder issue. But assuming he's ready to go, I wouldn't mind pairing him up with Kyler Murray. So what are your thoughts here on Murray and any of these pass catchers?
Yeah, I think like you said, now that we've got all these guys coming back healthy, it just makes it really tough to predict, who's going to be the top one. So maybe just taking the quarterback and one of those mid-tier players and hoping that they have that big game. Zach Ertz, if he plays, I think he's a really good option. He's seen a lot of targets since he was traded over to Arizona. So,
yep, and heavily involved in the red zone as well. Now, we do have a different dynamic with the backfield as well, potentially, as Chase Edmonds is questionable to get back out there. He's been dealing with that ankle issue, and that will be a big turning point here for this team and this slate, because we know Connor's been huge, 22 touches again last week, over 100 yards of offense, got in the end zone, and these guys both did well against the Rams. He had 50 yards rushing and 2 scores in that game. Edmonds, 12 carries for 120. So can they repeat those big numbers? I'm not sure. But we'll see how the pricing goes if they're both back. But I do think it's going to be a lot harder to trust a monster output from Connor with Edmonds being involved. So I'd probably be more likely to go Edmonds, assuming he has a nice price savings there.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'm going to have to reconsider, I think, in my season-long league because I have Connor. So see what happens there.
Absolutely. All right. Any other thoughts here on Game 2, the Monday night wrap-up to our primetime weekend?
No, I was just kind of thinking how, Peyton and Eli picked the wrong game. I think if they would have had this game, they would have had a lot more to be excited about and cheer on, because they had to sit and watch, the Patriots throw the ball 3 times. And I mean, it was kind of funny and comical how that all played out. But
yeah, seriously, for those 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks to watch a game where the Patriots only throw it 3 times.
Right.
That is funny. Yep. Going to be a little different scenario here, I would say, with a total over 50. All right, great. Well, hope everybody is ready to go for the showdown slates. Jump in with us again for the lineups, dfscoachtalk.com. We'll invite you into our Discord with an email, and then put up the full lineups on FanDuel and Yahoo and the cores for DraftKings. All right, that'll do it for our Week 14 coverage. Make sure to tune in with us next week for Week 15 and keep watching the NBA podcast 7 days a week. All right, on behalf of Josh Crash Davis and the rest of the DFS Coach Talk team, thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time as we look to crush it in DFS.